Hello, hello. Welcome. For those of you that are here live, it has been a long day, and you are like the endurance athletes of I/O attendees. I am very impressed that you are like still here and still going. Like, let's go. Let's hear it. It's awesome. All right. So if you didn't attend the earlier session that is basically about building assistant apps, or if you haven't experienced one, here's the 30-second overview, right? So this is something that the developer community builds to extend the assistant and basically connect with users directly through the assistant on the platforms where the assistant exists. So this is a representation of an eyes-free one that you might interact with on Google Home. And this is a representation of one that you might interact with on the phone. All right, that's assistant apps in 20 seconds. If you haven't built an assistant app, or even if you haven't watched the Build an Assistant App talk, it's fantastic. You'll be really impressed to see building one that's transactional even in like 10 minutes. So go do that. If you are watching on a stream, go do that now. If you are here, don't stay here. We'll keep going. OK. So we have had a ton of fun interacting with developer community, building these first assistant apps in the ecosystem. It's just been great to see how creative people have been, how they're trying to push the boundaries of this early system. We get submissions that are funny, and submissions that are useful, and submissions that are like a little naughty, like a really big variety, and it's been great. But this session is going to focus on a very particular aspect of assistant apps, and that is discovery. And specifically, that's a user thing, right? So you want users to be able to discover the hard work that you've been doing. And so we're going to start today from the user perspective. This is Jane. She is our user. While I'm introducing people, I thought I would mention that I am Valerie. I am one of your speakers. I'm on the product team for the Google Assistant, and this is Rob, one of our engineering leaders on the Assistant. Back to Jane. All right. Jane wants to know what she can do with the Google Assistant. Of course, she wants to know all the things that Google can help her with, but she very much wants to know about all the stuff that you can help her with, right? And we want that too. What we all want is easy discovery for Jane. We are in this together, like you and us and Jane, all like swimming in the same. I didn't have a good analogy there, but like we're all trying the same thing on the same page, going to the same goal. We're in it together. We all want the same thing. OK, so let's help Jane discover you. We're going to frame this in 3 sections. We're going to listen to what Jane is explicitly asking for. We're going to infer a little bit about what she wants when she just says what she wants to do, expresses an intent. And then sometimes we're just going to do something delightful for Jane. And to talk about these first 2 is Rob.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Valerie. Yes, and what I'm going to begin with is the most basic form of discovery. We call this explicit triggering. It's whenever a user invokes an app directly through its name. So let me shift over to the phone view and show you an example. Okay. Talk to Fitstar. Okay.
Sure, here's Fitstar.
So this talk to app pattern, app name pattern, it's special. We apply this to every single app automatically. And by default, when the user uses this particular pattern, we connect right to that particular app. So as a developer, this is the phrase you want to use in your advertisements when you're instructing users how to start up your app. It's, however, pretty basic, though, right? Mostly whenever users start up your app, they want to jump right into an activity. So let me show you another example of an explicit trigger. Ask Fitstar to start a workout.
Sure, here's Fitstar. Let's start with 7-minute workout. Up next.
OK, let's switch back to the slides. And what I showed here was an action phrase. start a workout, you can add an action phrase to an explicit invocation, and it kind of streamlines the user's actions. They're able to start up your app and jump right into an activity. Now, one thing to be careful about here is there can be many different versions of this action phrase, and so you're not always guaranteed to trigger on here. When you set up action phrases, be sure to test them out and make sure that they do trigger all the way through. Okay. So I can show you how to set up an action phrase now. If you're a developer that works directly in the action packages, what you want to do is find the intent that you want to connect the particular action phrase to, and then go to the trigger stanza. Inside the trigger stanza query patterns, you can list out all of the different action phrases that you want. So for instance, you see start a workout is there. If you're a developer that works with API.ai, it's a very simple two-step process to set up an action phrase. Similar to the action package, you go to your the target intents page, and then you list out the action phrases in the user says examples. That is step 1. And then in step 2, you go to the Actions on Google integration page, and you add your target intent as an additional triggering intent. And this will set up the action phrase for API.ai. OK, another thing to note about setting up explicit triggers, whether you're using action packages or API.ai, your final step will be to go to your console page and then list out up to 5 example invocations using your explicit triggering patterns. Now, be sure to check that all of these patterns do trigger your action. But this is really important because we take these 5 sample invocations, and we actually put them on your app's directory page. So here I have pictured the directory page for Fitstar. And if you see down towards the bottom, there's the Ask Your Assistant section. This lists out all of the different sample invocations that you provided. And it's really important for discovery because users are going to be browsing for apps inside of the directory. They could immediately try the app via the Try It button. But moreover, we want them to see how to invoke this sometime in the future when they're away from the directory. OK. So that's all very nice for whenever the user remembers your app's name or knows about your app. But let's go back to a case where Jane doesn't even know about your app or can't remember the name. This is the portion of discovery that we really want to make well, because we think this can make this will make all the difference in the world as far as getting exposure for apps. So what we're doing is we're building new algorithms so that users can just express their intent. They don't have to use an app name or anything. They can just express what they want to do. And partnering with you, I'll talk a little bit in a few slides about the ways you can help this. Partnering with you, we'll be able to just take their general intent and match it to the most relevant app. We call this implicit triggering. And let's go ahead. Actually, let me show you one example first here still. Here's an example. Jane wants to do a workout, so she says, give me a workout. Okay. And we actually do a little bit of implicit triggering today. It looks like what I have pictured on the screen here. We'll look at that intent, and then we'll find a matching app and just ask Jane if she wants to connect to that app. So here you see we said, do you want to talk to Fitstar? And Jane can say yes or no. Let's now go to the phone view. And I want to show you something we're working on. Give me a workout.
OK, I have a couple of options for that. Fitstar and 5-minute plank. Which one would you like to try?
OK, it's a subtle difference here. What we're doing is we're working on algorithms to find the high-quality matching apps for a particular intent. And then we want to display them in a nice visual manner that gives the user some cues about what the app does and allows the user to select it very easily. This, I think, we can really use to increase the exposure of apps to the user and also satisfy users' needs much better because they're just able to start off with a general intent. Can you go back to the slides? OK. So seeing this, probably a natural question you have is, how does my app get into this list, and how is this list ordered? So what we have to do here is a ranking problem, very similar to what we've done in web search. Many of the principles apply, but this is a brand new ecosystem, and so we still need to figure out new ways to apply these principles. We need to figure out what signals are important in this ecosystem. So this is still very much a work in progress. But I can give you a little hint about how we think about this. We think about our users. We think about what has Jane done in this context in the past. We also think about what do all of our assistant users do in this type of context. We also take advantage of Google's reach, and we also look at what users in other properties like Google Search or Google Maps do in this particular context. And together, this gives us a set of signals that we can then weave together into our ranking algorithms to find the most relevant apps for the user's intent. Now, how can you help us here? Remember this action package with the action phrases I showed a couple minutes ago? It's good to pay attention here and write out useful action phrases that describe what happens in your app. If you think about these are just natural language expressions of your app's capability. We can use this information in our matching and our ranking algorithms. Another thing that is helpful to help with your discovery is go ahead and, if you have an associated website or soon an associated Android app, go through the brand verification step in your app console. This lets us establish a link between your assistant app and your web page, and in the near future, also any of your Android apps. And as I mentioned, part of our ranking algorithms will look at some of our other properties like Google Search and Google Maps and such. This will allow us to establish the connection between the signals. So together, working on the action phrases, giving us some of this information about your connected sites, this can all help with your discovery. OK. So that's a quick overview of what we're trying to do to make it much easier for Jane to express in a natural way that they want to use a particular app or just do a particular intent. We want to go way beyond this. And we actually are working on other discovery means that will help Jane even figure out things she didn't know could be done on our platform. I'm going to hand this back to Valerie right now so she can go over these. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. OK. So I'm a huge fan of the implicit triggering that Rob was talking about. But what we want to talk about next is some kind of juicy, like on the front lines, it's coming, it's in development kind of stuff, right? So most of what you'll see next is directional. But we really wanted to share it with you so you have an idea about how we're thinking about things and what we expect to come next. All right, so serendipitous discovery. We're going to talk about this in a couple ways. We're going to talk about it both in the conversation stage, so like in dialogue when Jane is already interacting through the assistant, and we're going to talk about it off the conversation stage. So on the conversation stage first. All right, so let's say Jane has a request in mind, and let's say that it's a very typical request for someone to ask Google about, right? So for example, Jane wants to know about the Red Cat, which is a restaurant in New York. So she says, tell me about the Red Cat. Of course, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give her the information she asked for. Like that's, of course, the first thing we want to do. But she might also be delighted if we give her some other ways to continue the conversation, especially some ways to take action that's super relevant. So what you'll see here is some suggestion chips on the bottom about booking a table, about getting some pictures. You might, in another scenario, see menus or directions, other similar restaurants, things like that. Right? This is actually, you may have seen this in production today. This happens to be Google going to Google, but we want this to extend to developer-created features. So if you are watching the keynote and you were really paying attention to this really cool demo using Google Lens, right? So my colleague Ibrahim, he pointed the camera via the assistant at a marquee, and the assistant understood, right, that this was a band and offered some nice follow-on actions, right, about like hearing the music from the band or adding this to their calendar. Right in the middle there is getting tickets from Ticketmaster, which is one of our partners on Actions on Google. This is the kind of thing we want to do, right? So again, Jane has something in mind, right? She's trying to save this or hear their music, whatever she's trying to do. But we're saying, okay, did you want to buy tickets? This is not intrusive. This is not invasive. This is not insistent. It's just assistive and there for Jane if she wants it, right? And so we really want to be able to understand what are the actions that your assistant app can do so that we can offer it up in situations like these and see how it goes. We even, of course, want to combine this with what Rob was talking about earlier about giving you a provider selection, right? So let's get to the beginning of this video, and we'll walk through it. OK, so let's say Jane. She wants some pizza delivery. Again, pretty common query. She chooses a restaurant. She decides to place order. That was the first suggestion. And then she's got a couple of providers, right? So in Jane's mind, she's basically like, oh, I can actually place the order. Oh, I have a choice of providers. Like, this is what we want. It's not forced discovery. It's just contextual. All right. How do you get into that? Before I go on, how do you get into that? It's the same basic stuff, right, that Rob was talking about. Give us some clues about what your app can do, and we'll try to help take it from there. OK, so that's in the conversation stage. When Jane is elsewhere, for example, you may have seen the new Explore tab in the assistant experience. So if we can go to the phone. All right, so in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to tap there and get into this experience. And this is just a nice browse experience that lets our user see some things that she can do, right? So there's our FitStar. And she can just browse around and see some things that are her favorites, some things that are recent. And if she goes into FitStar, again, one of the things that you saw Rob show is these guys that are right in the center of the screen here, these sample invocations that will appear for her. Of course, this is something that our approvers do test, so you want to make sure, again, that these work. But these will invoke directly. So if I tap on this, it'll take us right into that FitStar experience. I'm not going to do that right this second, because I want to just talk about one more thing here. Having an attractive and appealing and concise both picture and especially the text explanation here is not just for the purposes necessarily of a user browsing on this surface. This is also a signal that is the kind of signal that Google likes to understand what your app does, right? So think about what you're going to put here. Think about something that's going to make sense to users right off the bat. Think about something that we might be able to understand is something that your app can fulfill, right? Just have a think about what goes in here. OK, great. And I think we can go back to the slides. Great. All right. Marketing. Sometimes we showcase you. Okay? We are looking for people to showcase. We are looking for experiences that we think our users will be attracted to and want to do, and we want to shout about them. We want, again, we want you discovered, right? So newsletters and blog posts and tweets and all of the above-the-line marketing that we have, right? We want to be able to feature your experiences. And so what I'm going to tell you next is one of the ways that we figure out, like, how can we decide who to feature? OK. It is absolutely true that Google does all the things that Google is known for, right? We are looking at all of the user signals we see in the wild. We are looking at repeat usage. We are looking at daily active users. We are looking at if someone goes into your experience, did they appear to have a good experience? Did they appear to leave early? All of these things are, of course, things we're observing. But I just wanted to let you know that we are early in this ecosystem, and we're also making somewhat qualitative judgments about deciding this as well. So you all know that we have approvers that are in our queue, and we have, of course, a lot of product people and engineers and the whole team thinking about, like, what are the fantastic experiences here? These are the questions that we ask ourselves, OK? When I go through an experience, I see all those cameras going up. Good. OK, so like these are the things that I think about, like, did I smile? Did I laugh? Did I learn something? Did I learn something interesting? Would I tell someone? Would I tell someone, like, right now? Would I call them over and be like, oh my gosh, you got to check this out? Would I use it again? Would I use it every day? Did it get better for me over time? Can it pick up where I left off? Like, did it do what I expected? Did it act as advertised, right? All of these kind of things are things that we're thinking about when we're thinking. So I'm not saying that, like, we're marking this down and then feeding into ranking directly. What I'm talking about here is really about featuring. But when you think about your experience, and before you hit submit, OK, you should be asking yourself these questions. And if you have anyone that can dog food for you, whether you work at a big organization where you have a big, trial and testing or dog food program, or you've got a buddy that can try out your app for you, ask these questions to them and to yourself. If you went through your entire experience and it did not make you smile, or it did not do something useful for you, or you did not learn anything, you may have a little ways to go before this is going to be like taking the world by storm. What you see in gray or black down at the bottom is also some things that we look at in terms of conversational hygiene, right? So was I, as a user, just confused at any point, especially when you're talking about a voice-driven product? If you don't know what to say, it's really difficult to recover, right? So when you are building for the phones, like, those suggestion chips are just really critical. Like, help the user out. When you're talking about the eyes-free experience, get them to a place where they kind of know how they should be responding. Did I have to repeat myself? Did it feel slow? And I'm not talking about, like, system slowness. Like, of course, everybody wants everything to be faster. But really, did it feel like your app responded slowly? Really think about that. And then finally, there are two pieces of hygiene that if you went to any of the VUI design talks, I'm positive that you heard. And we refer to them as no match and no input. Okay? No match is when the user says something that your app didn't expect. What did you do? Did you, like, reframe the question so that they felt like they had another chance to answer nicely? Or did you just wrote exactly what you said before? That has a really big impact in how your app feels conversationally. When the user either didn't respond fast enough, and so there's a timeout, or just you misheard them for whatever reason, right? So you got a no input. You did not hear their response. Did you have a good conversationally appropriate recovery from that? So please think about those things before you're thinking about, like, how many action phrases can I load into my action package that I trigger all the time? That's, like, not the right way to think about it, right? The right way to think about it is give us some things that you think are really, really salient. We will notice if you give us a bunch of things that are not really salient, right? And make your app something that people really want to come back and use. There are a ton of design resources, absolutely a ton, and some great talks here that you can find. And there are also a ton of resources on generally building assistant apps. And so I look forward to seeing what you all do. I'm going to leave you with a basic checklist, right? So 4 items, 4 calls to action for you to do. To be more discoverable, do that branded verification. I know that kind of sounds like we're just checking on who you are, but really, we're talking about connecting your other properties, if you have them, so that we can get some more information from that, right? So get some signal from that. Number 2, Like, just create a really nice informative directory listing. Make it relevant, give it actionable language. These are actions. Number 3, I know you're all going to add the action phrases. Like, I'm 100% sure. Do add relevant ones. We observe things like, well, this triggered and it flopped, or this triggered and it was really successful, right? And as the ecosystem matures, we'll get better and better at that as well. So please be thoughtful in these, but really, really pay some attention here. And finally, like, make something awesome. Make something that people want to use, and that when you do that like qualitative evaluation for yourself, you're like, this was hilarious, or this was essential. This is something I need to do every day, right? Mm-hmm. Create something that you love. That's it. Thank you.